Welcome guys, I am Vikram Kakkar, a student of ACAS Cloud. Today we will have a look at Microsoft Azure DNS zones. So first of all, we need to know what's a DNS server. A DNS server has a record which can convert domain names into IP addresses. So this is a bit like your mobile phone. Your mobile phone has a list of all your contacts and their phone numbers. Similarly, a DNS server has a record with all the domain names and their respective IP addresses. So when a client wants to access google.com, the request first goes to the DNS server, which will look up its records and find the IP address of google.com and send the IP address to the client. And then the request from the client will go to Google Web Server, and the client is then able to access google.com. There are two types of DNS zones, global and private. To create a global DNS zone, you need to register your domain name on godaddy.com. A global DNS zone can be accessed by members of the public from anywhere in the world, while a private DNS zone is, for example, a company network, and only members within the network or the users within the network can access the private DNS zone. So let's now have a look at how to configure a DNS zone. We will configure a private DNS zone today. Now let's have a look in Azure how to create DNS zones. I've already created a resource group in Azure. I'm going to create a virtual network, two subnets, one public and private, as well as two NSGs, a public NSG and private NSG. And again, Windows with a public IP and a Linux machine without a public IP. I'll create the virtual network. I'll create two subnets, a public subnet and a private subnet. I'll create the NSGs now. So again, it will be a public NSG and a private NSG. We will create a secure inbound security rule for the public NSG. So we want to allow RDP connection, which will be from my public IP into the Windows VM. We will now create two VMs. One will be a Windows VM with public IP attached to the public NSG, and a Linux VM without a public IP, and it will be attached to the private NSG. Now I'm going to remotely log into the Windows VM. From the Windows VM, I will log into the Linux VM via Putty software. Once I have logged into the Linux VM, I will install the Apache 2 server within that. I have now logged into Putty. I am now going to install the Apache 2 server in it. So now that we have created the network and the VMs, we will now create the DNS zone. So I will go to the search bar and search for private DNS zones. So I already have that in my record. You just need to go on the search bar, and when you get the first option, it's generally the one. I click create. I click select the resource group. Now this is where I need to give the name of my domain. I will call it myowndomain.com, and I will click create. The domain name has been created. I create a record set. A record set is basically just the www, so it's the World Wide Web. And it asks for the IP address with which this domain name needs to be associated with. So I will associate this with the Linux machine. Now the Linux machine does not have a public IP. I will use the private IP of the Linux VM. And finally, I will create the virtual network link. This needs to be linked to the network. I'll select the link name. I'll call it my link. And I will select the virtual network which we have created and click OK. So the virtual link has been created. Now the final step is we need to confirm if the domain name which we have created can be accessed from the network. I will go inside the Windows VM. I will open the internet and I'll go to the settings. I will delete all the previous browsing history. I'm doing this because I want to delete all the cache memory which the server holds. so that when I try and search the website which I have created, it does not conflict with any previous cache memory the server may hold, and the request may be unauthorized. So now I've deleted all history. I will go to the Windows command as well, and I'll give this command, which will also delete all the cache memory. Now that this has been done, I will close the Internet tab and I will reopen the Internet, and I will type the website which I have just created. The name of the website we gave was myowndomain.com, and let's see if that works. So this has been successful. The Linux web page has opened. So we created, first of all, the network and two VMs, one with public IP and one without a public IP, associated to a public NSG and a private NSG respectively, within a virtual network. And then we created the private DNS zone, giving it a domain name. We added the record set, which is www, and we associated it with the virtual network which we have created. And finally, we confirmed if it works or not. So hope today's session is useful for you guys. Thank you very much.